I'd like to welcome those who are here for continuing education. It's always nice to have people here during the lunch hour and through the day and talking and so forth. It's been very, very sad since the Ambassador Bible College students left, and it's nice to have a little bit of that noise and activity back here at the home office. Also, very special greeting to David and Natasha Teague, who are here from Poughkeepsie, New York. Natasha is responsible for our Russian-speaking areas, letter answering, translation. She puts together the Russian Good News, which is the abbreviated Good News of the regular one, and also the Estonian Good News. She does quite a bit of work for us, and yesterday we had some very, very good discussions about some of the things we're proceeding with. We have 4 booklets all translated, ready to be printed and to be sent out. I'd like to welcome all those who are on the webcast. I'm just amazed as to how many people are listening. I know you're out there, so welcome to the home office. I was told that the sermonette speaker wasn't able to be here today, so I was invited to give the update or to use the sermonette time to talk about some developments in the works. So I thought I would talk about what I was going to submit to the forward column, which is due Monday, for the United newspaper. And I was going to talk about what really is forward coming in the church, and probably one of the most forward things that we have done, which is the hiring of 6 ministerial trainees. This is one of the biggest steps that we have taken in the area of human development and leadership in the church. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this process and what we have done. We have hired elders over the years, especially a lot in the last 5 years, to pastor churches. And they've helped stabilize local congregation, and their service is greatly appreciated. But as we look to the future, we see a great need for younger men and women to be trained for the ministry who will be able to serve the church for 30 or more years. We're not that interested really in hiring those who are 62 or 65 or 70 years old, because it is unknown how long they will continue their service. We're also having ministers who are retiring. We had a number retire, and one announcement was made about Fred Keller's retiring here just in the e-news yesterday. And there will be more this coming year, and that process will accelerate. We need to fill those roles with some of the younger men and women in a very vital role in the church. It is very vital that we continue our ministry, and we can only find the people for this from within. We can't just put an ad in the newspaper and said, hiring ministers, call 911 or whatever. We can only hire them from people we already know. And it's not even like jobs like developers or illustrators and other non-ecclesiastical jobs. It has to be somebody who is suited from within our ranks as a member, and somebody who's pretty much spent a lot of time in understanding who we are, what we do, and what that mission is. The ministry is a job you can't just choose. It isn't a job that you can say, well, what should I be? Should I be a nuclear physicist, or should I be a minister, or should I be a biologist? I think I'll be a minister. You can't choose it in that manner. The ministry is a calling, and it is a job, it is a role that is received when you are brought forward by peers, by elders, by pastors with high recommendations. And so what we are choosing now in these 6 is those we consider to be candidates, and we're very hopeful that all of them will be successful in being able to continue with a career of serving the church. The United Church of God is developing these people, and I believe that this is one of the boldest and best steps for our future that we have taken. And I truly believe that the Spirit of God is brooding over these people and will be helping them in what they will be called to do. Attention has been given also to the wife. We announced and had pictures of all these people yesterday or Thursday in the e-news, and we consider the wife to be a very, very important part of the ministry of her husband. And the 6 that we have chosen, we didn't just announce the man's name, but also announced his wife's name, who we feel will be a very important part of the infrastructure of the local congregation. While she won't be giving sermonettes or sermons or doing anything public she will be doing quite a bit alongside her husband in the development of that church. What we are doing with the process of hiring ministerial trainees is not new. It's actually new for the United Church of God after 20 years. We have only had one ministerial trainee in all our 20 years. And he's successful. He's now pastor of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, David and Joy Jones. But we decided this year to go with 6 and to work with them as a group, like a class. When I graduated from Ambassador College, we had the class of 1969, and we still kind of know each other, some of them, such as Tony Wasselkoff and myself, who are part of that same class. And we go back at that time. So we want to have a sense of community and a sense of bonding between these 6. We're sending them out to 6 different parts of the country. But before, where we came from, ministerial trainees was a job that was done very, very regularly. The 6 couples that have been chosen have been Dan and Kim Preston, and Dan will be serving here in Cincinnati under the mentorship of the pastor here, Steve Myers. Aaron and Whitney Creech, who will be going out east. I don't want to identify the areas yet, as we are still working on absolute confirmation. Louis and Lena Van Osdel, who will also be going north. Jay and Jennifer Ledbetter already are in place in Dallas, Texas, and will be working with Mark Welch. Josh and Rebecca Lamoro in the northeast, and Nathan and Jacqueline Ekema, who are in Phoenix and maybe move to another area. What we are inspired by these people is their energy, is their desire, is their integrity, is their sense of consciousness about the work, the job that they are faced with. It's not a job that they have taken lightly. They are making major career changes, in some cases income changes. But they are filled with a mission and purpose of moving the church forward in its ministry, which is extremely important. These people are converted. These are people that have demonstrated wisdom and maturity. And above all, in one sense, I just love the pioneering spirit. Just like when I started, I remember we were so excited about being able to go out into the field, as it was called. We knew nothing about what the future would bring. We hired in at $400 a month, not knowing exactly where this would take us. We had to pretty much settle where we were told and start working with the pastor in that area. And I see the same spirit here with these young people who are moving in, except they're not as young as we were. I was 21 years old when I started as a ministerial trainee. I graduated in Brick and Wood, Ambassador College. I had only a college debt. That's the only thing I really brought with me. I had no car. But more people called me Mr. Kubik then than do now. And I knew a whole lot more than I do now. The Bible, though, talks greatly about the training of young people. In the New Testament, in Jerusalem, there was no ambassador college, but there was a way to develop the ministry which has developed to this very day. Moses trained Joshua as his successor to lead the Israelites into the Promised Land. There was a person who worked with somebody who was older, with the expectation that he would be the one to carry on. Elijah worked with Elisha in dealing with the job of being a prophet in Israel. Christ trained the 12 disciples. Christ was not a loner who just went here and there and spoke. Christ had a ministry of teaching, of mentoring, of setting an example, of showing the disciples how to pray, how to react to people, how to conduct himself in various social situations. Christ was continually teaching his disciples for a period of more than 3 years in preparation for what Christ knew was to take place, the continuation of Christianity, of Jesus Christ, that ministry that continues to this day. And so we are not shrinking back at all from this great calling to us in administration of moving forward. We must do this. This is not something that's being done quickly. It is something that is actually greatly delayed. But after a full 19-year time cycle in the United Church of God, we are ready to move forward with something that has worked in the past and will continue to work. Paul and Timothy is a classic example in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul spoke about picking up this young man in Asia Minor in Acts chapter 16 in verse 1. Acts 16 verse 1, it describes the Apostle Paul when he came to Derbe and Lystra. And behold, a certain disciple was there. He was a member. He was somebody who was a student learning, came to Paul's lectures, sermons, named Timothy, the son of a certain Jewish woman who believed, but his father was Greek. He was well spoken of by the brethren, so he had a good reputation. He had good recommendation. This Timothy, this Timothy was a good guy. People around him said he was a good person, well spoken of. And so Paul, verse 3, wanted to have him go with him. And we have so many of the books of Paul who greets them from Paul and Timothy. Timothy was by his side. Timothy he mentored, and he wrote a special book to Timothy, and also to another person who was a disciple of his that he was mentoring called Titus, on how to conduct himself in the ministry. God called Barnabas and Paul to go to the Gentiles, but then Paul took Timothy and taught him how to care for people. And a description is given of Timothy as a person that was well qualified for this purpose. Again, I say the ministry is not a job that you can choose. And we have people that come to us and say, I want to be a minister. Well, I say, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And chances are not. Because the ministry is a very special calling that requires very special people. It's very subjective about how you work with people and how you care for people, how you interrelate with them. But here's one of the qualities of Timothy as described by Paul in the book of Philippians. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 19. I trust in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you shortly, that I also may be encouraged when I know your state. So Paul is writing from Rome. He says, I'm going to send you Timothy here soon. For I have no one like-minded who will sincerely care for your state. This was a very, very high aspect or characteristic of Timothy that made him a special minister, caring for somebody else's state. That's very, very important and vital, and that is something that we have to determine. He says, for all, verse 21, seek their own, not the things which are of Jesus Christ. Now, sometimes we say, well, we need people for the ministry. All of a sudden we get questions, well, what am I going to make? Or what are the benefits? What kind of retirement program do you have? Well, believe me, something that does not set well. We need people that are so interested in this job that they will trust God, they will have faith that He will take care of them, and it's not something different from what we had to go through. We had no idea. We had no health insurance. We had no retirement plan. We just had a big dream and a big vision. And you know something? God has taken care of us all these years. But here we have Timothy who says that Paul talking about Timothy saying he's a person who will sincerely care for your state. He says, because all seek their own, not the things which are of Jesus Christ. But you know his proven character, that as a son with his father, he served with me in the gospel. Therefore, I hope to send him at once, as soon as I see how it goes with me. He was sending Timothy with the highest recommendations because he was a person who really deeply cared. We started our ministry, and the ministry that we have right now in the United Church of God, the ministry that is coming to the point of retirement, was trained through the ministerial trainee program. Again, we started at a very, very young age. Again, when I started at age 21, I could still travel between Sioux Falls and Rapid City on Western Airlines on my youth pass. And I was the ministerial assistant at that time. I liked what I did at college. I loved my Bible classes. But I knew very little about the job of the ministry. And I learned a great deal for the men that I worked for. The very first person I worked for was amazing as far as his patience with elderly people, with people that weren't popular. He could spend hours with them, I would sit on visits on a hot Sunday, or on a hot afternoon, saying, when are we going to get out of here? Be for 2 hours, he'd be talking to somebody. And the conversation really went nowhere, but this person needed to have somebody who talked to them, somebody who would spend time with them. I learned a great deal about that kind of patience from him. The second person I worked for was a real driver. He had me doing all kinds of things. The first one didn't allow me to even say very much. He said, you just listen. And so I'd be listening to him, talking to somebody for a long period of time. In fact, at first I was talking too much. He told me, you talk too much. In fact, every Tuesday morning he had an evaluation of me. He had this big chart. He says, you did this right this week, you did this right this week, but you didn't do this right. He says, well, you talk too much, you talk too much. So I stopped talking, period. He says, how can you be a minister if you don't say anything? So anyway, he was good. He was good. I really liked him. Sorry that he died just a few years ago, and I couldn't see him before his death. But the second one was a hard driver. He gave me a lot of responsibility. He just turned all kinds of things over to me, especially communications matters. We didn't have internet at that time. Telephone calls were expensive, but he had me do a lot of letters. He said, "I want you to respond here. Write this letter here. Write this letter of encouragement." Again, we didn't have anything really but the 10-cent stamp. That was the way that we did our work. But I learned a lot about him, about just hard work, being thorough, and being accurate, and not exaggerating, being totally honest about what we were doing, and the work of God. He was just a real stickler for detail, and I really appreciate what I learned. The third person I worked for, still as a ministerial trainee, was very good at organization and management. He was district superintendent and had 5 ministers that worked in the metro area. And he was excellent as far as delegating work. He says, okay, you go see these people this week, you go see these people this week, and he would mix them up, and he really had a knack for managing the area, which had 1,000 members at that time. And I learned a lot about just keeping track of things, organizing things. He had a very, very odd little device that I still have myself to this day. He had this rolling pad, like a cash register roll on a pad, and he just wrote notes down and then kind of scrolled up. But through the day, he could see who he had talked to, what he had done, telephone numbers. He could reconstruct his day with this thing. And you know something? I still use that on my desk upstairs because it was a little odd thing he had. I can't even get that roller paper anymore, but I bought a whole case of it, which will last me into the millennium. But it's a way that I keep track of things through the day. And then if I thinking about somebody called me 2 hours ago, what was their telephone number? I can kind of go back there and I could take this information and put it there. But he was just very, very good about that process. In 2 Timothy 2 and verse 2, Paul explained more about the training process and part of what we'll be doing ourselves in an accelerated way. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. The things that you have heard from me among many witnesses, he says, he's writing to Timothy, he says, the things that you've heard me talk about and teach and things that you have just come into contact with, commit these to faithful men. Take the things that you have learned and then pass them on to another group of people who are faithful, who will be able to teach others also. And we are entering a phase, an era within the United Church of God where we're going to be passing this on to the next generation. As ministers are retiring and as we look to new leadership, which is here, is staring us in the face. When we had the first announcements made about the 6 hirings, and we're going to be looking at others who will be hiring too within the next year, or probably 1 year from now, but we're going to be looking at people, we'll be evaluating them. We have a group of about 200 people that we have as a base of people to work from, plus anyone else that comes to us, about who will be able to carry on from here, who will we be able to commit our job to. Anyway, the things that you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. This is how the truth was going to be passed on. So, We also are going to have a training session this summer, and with regularity, bring this group of 6 couples in. And those of us who have been pastors for 30, 40 or more years, I've been a pastor for 41 years, and most Sabbaths did 2 services on the Sabbath, had 25 years of Spokesman's Club, to the point I couldn't stand another get the facts speech. All these things that, we have just really been hard-boiled into. We'll be able to spend time with this group, answer questions, do some more training, more discussion, talk about the subtleties of the ministry, and do evaluations. Do a lot of evaluations, just the way that we were evaluated about doing our jobs better. Unfortunately, this summer we only have 8 days that we could find where everybody could be together. But next year, when this program is well established, it'll be part of their job that we want you here for this type of training. There's so many things to talk about that aren't really known until you have to face them. But we're going to talk to our group about how to talk to people about marriage, not only in what we preach about marriage or what to preach or how much to preach, but also in counseling about marriage. We're going to talk about how to comfort the bereaved. We're going to talk about abuse. We're going to talk about addictions. We'll talk about baptisms, how to recognize, how to talk to, how to stimulate people to think about this subject. We're going to talk about children. We're going to talk about women. We're going to talk about everything you could possibly talk about that I can't just spell out like this, but that we want to do in a way that will be useful. We also want to invite to this, in fact, more than just invite, we're going to ask some of the new hires that we have had to also come for this intensive training session. People who have been new hires but maybe don't understand everything about their job. They're great folks, but they haven't had any type of formal training. In most cases, they have been elders for some time but have not been pastors, and just need to understand more about some of the subtleties and some of the aspects of the work that have not been passed on. Certain social skills, communication skills. We'll review the qualifications of the ministry, learning to work with difficult people. I would say this, that the vast majority of our people are just fine. But Pareto's law, the 20-80 rule, the 80-20 rule, 20% of the people will take 80% of your time. And that's what gives ministers job security, so to speak. Some people say the ministry would be a great job if it weren't for the people. Nonetheless, it's one of the highest callings and one of the most exciting callings that you can be a part of. I know that when I went to Ambassador College, I wanted to be in the ministry. It was something that was a dream. I won't shrink away from saying that it wasn't something that I didn't think about. I thought about it a lot. I don't regret a single day, but also we have to face reality of what's expected, what is demanded, and what the job brings, and get away from some of the glorious hierarchical type of thing, but go into servant leadership, husband and wife ministry working together, husband with his wife by his side, helping him in his ministry. We'll talk about the traps that a minister can fall into. A minister has to watch out for his own soul. While he is helping others, he has to be careful about himself. God has blessed the church with a number of things very, very wonderfully of late. He's blessed us with finances that we are very, very happy with. The Pentecost offering was 2.5% above last year. We are very, very blessed with media and the efforts that we have done with consolidating everything under Beyond Today. We're about ready to really take off with a lot of things. Our new website is, to me, very exciting with the work that they have done. These are things that have already been finished and done. We're not talking about what we need to do. These are major things that have been accomplished. I feel like the next step in this puzzle, if you want to put it, is to build an infrastructure of a new ministry that will serve this church ably for the next 30, 40 years, if that is how much time we have. We're so very thankful for the environment of peace that we have in the church. And hopefully then we'll be able to carry on with the greater aspects of the mission that this church has, of preaching the gospel into all the world and making disciples and caring for those disciples. So this is the way that God is going to continue bestowing his grace and peace upon the church.